exclusively for schools, teachers, and sometimes parents and pupils in Malta. Just for those of you that haven't met me before, my name is Alistair Cameron, and I am your contact here at J2E. And we're joined here by Tanya as well. And as we go through today's webinar, I'm going to do it all live this week. We're not going to have any PowerPoints or slides or J2E5 presentations at all. We are simply just going to do a deep dive into J2Code in honor of EU Code Week. There's a ton of resources out there. EU Code Week is all about raising standards in digital literacy and also that whole thing about the fourth industrial revolution, which is making sure that children are being taught necessary skills for perhaps jobs that don't exist just yet. Coding is the way forward, certainly during times of crisis like this, with the pandemic getting people locked in. It's one occupation that will certainly be in hot requirements for the foreseeable future. The skills that are brought out born by coding. Some of those skills include computational thinking skills, the ability to break down problems and challenges into component parts and to be able to solve those. And we're going to go through some steps of computational thinking and how to build on that with the features within J2E's platform that Malta has had for quite some time, called J2Code, and it's going to be J2Code is fully available for you for the whole of this academic year, so please do make use of it. Just for those of you that haven't been signed in before and haven't used J2E, a quick reminder for you here is how to get in. So the first thing that you need to do with a school account in Malta is to go to a website called j2e.com/Malta, all lowercase. And here we start where you choose whether you are one of the two options on the page. And once you've done that, you log in either with your iLearn credentials or your Microsoft login credentials, depending on where you're from, and it'll get you straight into J2E. And here is what you'll see. If you don't, and if you can't, then please do get in touch and we will be able to resolve that the very same day for you. And okay, so once you're in, just a little reminder, one of the benefits of using J2E to support anything and everything that you are doing in J2Code is that everything the students create automatically gets saved into their own My Files area, which means that you as the teacher can see everything that your students are doing, whether they are making a piece of code, whether they're writing a program, have been making a picture using lots of coding techniques that we're going to go through today, or whether they have been writing about the coding or using coding in other ways inside J2E. Whatever it is that they do, because you're always staying inside J2E doing this, everything that your pupils do will be visible in your pupil files area, which is this tile here. And you can dip into there and you'll see some green folders and some purple folders. The green ones have been automatically set up for you by your iLearn logons, and you'll be able to dip into your files and see any of your students and go and see their coding work straight away. So that's how you'll easily be able to track everything that your students are doing. So not only will the lesson happen in the class, but the students will instantly be able to pop home and at the right time, obviously, be able to go and practice and replicate everything that they were doing in the classroom and perhaps take themselves a stage further. And that's one thing that we do see quite commonly is when you are delivering a coding lesson, it can be short and sweet, but typically what happens is we see a lot of engagement at the end of the day when students are home because they can continue and are desperate to continue to practice their coding skills because it's a simple fact that your code can be refined and improved continuously. So how do we do it? Well, there is a tile here called J2Code, which is this one here. and you open that up. Now, as a teacher, as an educator, or as a pupil, you get to see the main 4 programs available that you can play with, use to your heart's content. They are full programs in there. So there are 4 full programs of different types of coding that all produce really different sort of outcomes. And I'm going to take you through all of these today, and I'm going to give you some examples of how you can use this, because if I was you, and thank you for answering those questions, because you've really helped me out there in just simply explaining whether you've used this before, whether you've taught coding, etc., is I know where to start now. And what we have here is not just these coding engines that you can get your students playing with and practicing using, but there are a wide range of lesson plans that go alongside this that will, I mean, if I was a teacher, I would be latching onto those resources very quickly, having a quick read through, and then being able to confidently deliver a lesson at any age range that I wanted to, that I needed to teach. And let's just have a quick overview of the different platforms. We'll look at them in turn from the younger years. Now, I know it says year 1 and year 2, but however, coding for year 1 and year 2, which is the Turtle program here, that could be used very, very well in grades 3 and 4, and in fact I've used that last term with grade 4 students myself, who found this really quite an interesting program to play with, because some of them hadn't ever had any coding experience before, and it was a great way to get started. So don't be afraid of taking something like the Turtle program to some of your older students, just to bed in some concepts just to get them used to and familiar with some concepts for coding. So here we go. Let's look at JIT Turtle. Now, those of you that are familiar with the JIT range of tools for younger learners, JIT always starts with a template. And in this one, I'm going to use the space template, and you'll see why in a minute. So the concept here is very similar for all of the Turtle games that you can play here and practice with. The concept is that you have a sprite. Here is your sprite. It starts on the moon in this case. There are a wide range of command options where you can control the sprite, and you can also play the program, which is the algorithm that builds up at the left-hand side of the pane there. And there are a variety of different flavors of doing this with all of the different templates that we provide, such as a car park, a desert, the story of the 3 little pigs, the story of Cinderella, and lots of other things as well. So here we go. We've got a town center, for example, as an example of how you can have a template in the background. Doesn't need to stop there. I'll show you in a minute how you can add more backgrounds and different ways that you can practice building an algorithm. So that is JIT 5. I'll come back to all of these in turn and give you a little bit of greater focus on them shortly. Visual is your equivalent to Scratch. It is a very, very simple program that enables children to use all of the commands that are available from a Blockly style, like Scratch style of programming, with all of the range of different commands here, and we'll come to more of these later on, where you can build out your code. You can add multiple sprites, multiple backgrounds, and various different ways to animate things as well. So within Visual, you've got the ability to do animation and background changes, and lots of really interesting, quite complex coding algorithms as well that can produce some really interesting results, including some actual games that children can play and share and evaluate with each other too. So that's Visual. So that's JIT and Visual. Then you've got Logo. Now, for me, this was my very first introduction to coding when I was about 7 years old. and loved it. It was a bit different back then because what it was a massive, great perspex dome about the size of a car tire that was on the floor and probably cost several £1,000s and turned up in a school once in a blue moon when the school A had space, B had time, and the technology was available. That all it simply did was allow you to make a control process of going forwards, backwards, left and right with pen up and pen down to draw different things. So it is a very well used tool, and Logo is built on levels, just as the rest of the tools are in J2Code. The JIT, the visual and code are all built on these levels. You start at level 1 with some very basic commands. You then can move to level 2, which have all those very basic commands, but also enables you to see the visual script of the language that's happening in the background. So for example here, you'll see as I'm clicking the forwards and backwards buttons and the repeat and turn left and turn right buttons, you'll see that the instructions appear on the screen that you can edit. Then you move to level 3 and you introduce a great deal of additional commands that add a great deal of complexity to it, but enable children to produce some fantastic results. So it's all leveled and able to be tailored for the needs of your students as they are progressing through the learning curve of building on their skill set using code. Okay, so and the last one if we've done JIT, visual and logo, and the last one that we've got is microbit. So this is a software version of the hardware and software that the BBC provide, which is all the commands that you could use in order to prepare your device for microbit. So here, for example, you've got the microbit board, and you can use all of the commands and all of the operators and variables, etc., all of the different controls that you would need in order to, when you've got the device in front of you, be able to successfully create a program that would run with various different sensors. If you're not familiar with microbit, it's a BBC concept that allows you to plug in a board that, as you see here, to be able to program it. That will also enable you to add various different other devices, such as a heat sensor or a light sensor or motion sensor, etc., or an infrared sensor, and be able to control various different things such as motors, which can produce all sorts of different reactions. So there you have quite a comprehensive range of different coding engines and coding types that may suit the various interests of your students. So those are the 4 engines there. At the top of the page, students and teachers alike will see these lesson plans. Very useful for you to use as an educator, because what you can do is every single one of these areas, so this is year 1 and 2, year 3 and 4, and year 5 and 6. Let's start at year 1 and 2, but as I've said, they are equally usable further up the age ranges as well. Once I've clicked on year 1 and 2, so if I press it, it'll toggle between the lesson plans and the screen to go into actually using the tools. Once I'm there and I'm clicking on it, I'll see 3 things. I'll see an icon that opens out the actual program itself, a video to watch, which will probably be about 2 minutes, that will explain what the program does, how the program works, and how you can deliver it as a successful lesson that is interesting and engaging. And it'll also explain how you can deliver some form of assessment that goes along next to it too, to support your students. So if I click the video, up pops the video, and there I'll have, yep, I can hear it playing in the background, have the video being able to be watched. What you've also got in this lesson for every single one of the lesson activities is the lesson plan. Now follow these if you want to deliver a really simple, highly effective lesson. I've done this on numerous occasions in brand new settings with students that have never used Just2Easy before, and I am self-confessed, very limited coder. I couldn't code my way out of a paper bag, I don't think. But it does mean that following a lesson plan like this gives out everything that you will need as a teacher to be able to introduce the basic concepts of the lesson and deliver an interesting lesson that will allow you to answer questions that your children have, stretch children in various different ways that will allow them to develop their own skills in their own time, as well as an opportunity to assess and do some follow-up work with them too. Every one of these lesson plans is provided with three things, which is a template, an example, and the video that goes with it. So the template is where it's the starting point for the children to get going. So that template is what your students will click on to have the lesson started once we've gone through the discussion activities about it. The example is always, I think the best way to equate this is you wouldn't write a book without reading a novel. I may have got that the wrong way around, but in essence, what I'm saying is if you want to know how to code, it's always good to look at an example. It's a bit like music, isn't it? Everything's plagiarized to a certain extent, even back into classical music. It is. But why reinvent the wheel when there are fantastic opportunities to play with the code that other people have made, because the concepts are still the concepts that need to be learnt, need to be taught and understood. So here I've got an example of this lesson, which I can pop into as well. And what this example, if I just press play here, what it's doing is two things. The sprite is moving across the screen because the challenge was to get the spaceship to all of the planets. But at the left-hand side here as well, I'm showing the algorithm build that allows me to see all of the stages of the spaceship making its journey around all of the planets, because that's what the lesson was. The idea of this particular lesson was to be able to create an algorithm that makes the rocket move. Really simple basic steps that children can practice and learn from. So you would ask them some questions shown in the example like this of how can we get the rocket to the orange planet, and what do the green and red pencil buttons do? An opportunity to ask these questions to your children to be able to find out for themselves. Now, running this as an activity could be a whole class activity or an independent learning activity. As a class activity, what I find great fun is the opportunity for children to be able to work together or work as a whole class, perhaps with one student controlling the computer and the rest of the students trying to assist that student in a number of steps. So when I'm running a lesson with Turtle and we're looking at the spaceship, I would ask one student to come to the front to use the computer and get the other children to support that student with my questioning, such as how would I get the spaceship to go to the orange planet? And what you'll see here on the screen, if I just zoom in a little bit, let's just go down to the bottom here, you see this mode is simple. And you've got advanced mode as well. So a great way to get started to working with different levels of coding ability is to go through the process of getting a student to navigate the spaceship in a number of moves to the orange planet, for example. You could make this up to whatever task you want it to be. And what you'll see happening is when the algorithm, which is this set of instructions on the left-hand side here, when we're clicking, it's instantly moving the rocket, and it's also immediately adding the algorithm, which the students can then learn what the algorithm is and what an algorithm is, and actually see it happening on the screen. The next stage to this, we could perhaps return home, start the whole thing again. We can always clear, which is the erase button at the bottom here, and we can always play it again just to see that everything's working correctly. But if we go home, And if we have perhaps made some mistakes, we can always debug the code, introducing new terminology to your students, whereby we can either remove parts of the instruction because they will make mistakes, or put instructions in a different order. So maybe put the term right at the end, and then see what happens to our instructions. We didn't quite get there, so we can keep trying. Now, let me just erase all of that, and I'll show you what the advanced level does. Because if the instructions are the same thing of navigate to the orange planet, if I click now, I'm going to click forwards as I did before, nothing happens. Not a dicky bird. But what's happening as I have clicked is that the algorithm has built already on the left-hand side. So whatever I do here will always happen in the algorithm. So I can see I've built the algorithm, the code, the instructions, but it doesn't do anything until I press play and I run the program. And I can see the instructions as they happen. And therefore, if I run that again, I'll be able to debug and improve on the code that I've made. Now, as with all of the JIT programs, when a student does this for themselves, the student will always be able to save their work and come back to it another point. And what that means, of course, is that the students will have saved their work to my files, which means as the educator, you will be able to go and see their file in pupil files and have that stored as evidence of the lesson taking place and of evidence of where that student is specifically at with their understanding of algorithms and basic coding instruction. And if I go back, there are progressive lessons that allow students to work through skills in algorithms and coding. Lesson 2, for example, is the ability to debug code. And lesson 3 is to understand really how block coding works and also to make a simple program there. So let's have a look at the lesson plan for lesson 3. And let's just have a look at the next one, which is here. And we're going to move now into visual. So perhaps I should have looked at the example here. So this is popped now from JIT to the next level of learning, which is in visual. And what you're seeing on the screen is just as you would see in Scratch, the commands that you can see here, which is about positioning. So here we've got the ability to play. And now we're transitioning from Turtle to a block coding program that enables you to do exactly the same thing that you were doing in JIT Turtle by, for example, producing a direction of travel for the spaceship, which produces shapes. But instead of doing it in the JIT Turtle game, it's doing it in the instructions from Visual, the block coding program. And as you notice, if I press play again, it actually highlights the steps that it's going to. So we've introduced some of these concepts here of pen up, pen down, moving in a particular direction, forwards or backwards, and also moving by a specific amount, making some turns by a specific amount, and then moving again and repeating that process. Now that's a very, very simple set of instructions there, and everything has been laid out for you to complete that activity. Firstly, within the lesson plan. I'm on the wrong one, sorry. Let's go back into the lesson plan. Let's go back down here. Okay, so here is your lesson plan to recap the work that we've done previously and then introduce the motion blocks which I just showed you here, which are the different motion blocks: moving, turning, set the direction, point towards something particular, move, or go to a grid position, or go to a mouse pointer. So all of this has been set out for you, firstly with the sprite, which is the rocket. So the sprite is there, which is the rocket. And also what's been laid out for you in this lesson is the background. Artwork that's all been provided, ready to make it a fun activity that's visually stimulating. So let's just go back and have a look at the code itself. And that's the example. Now, what of course you could do, apart from following the lesson through itself, which then sets up the task of experimenting with the rocket to make sure you understand how it moves. Can you make it go square? And then the next task would be to perhaps move the rocket to the moon and back to its starting position, experimenting to do this in different ways. Lots of inventive ways that children can do this. And then it explains for the lesson to stop what the children have been doing and then create a new background and a new rocket sprite and how to change them and change the sizes. So we're now introducing some more complex commands for what we can do with the constructs of the coding program. So here, for example, we've got the space theme in the background here. But we could equally add a new picture. Now, oops. And what I did there was I clicked on the background itself. So I've clicked on, if you see at the top here, you've got two objects. You've got the background, which is called space in this example, and you've got the sprite, which is the rocket. So if I go to the background first and I just click on the background itself, there you may be able to do some coding with the background, but if I just click on the background, I could do one of two things. I could change the background by adding a new background, and it's got all sorts of different ones there that I could use. And I mean, I could put any other backgrounds in that I wanted to add in here. So here is my alternative background, which I've added in there. But you could also do something with your own pictures as well. Now, if you've been on any of my webinars, you'll recognize that these are some of the pictures that I've used before. And I mean, here was an owl that I took from the previous webinar that I did. And I could simply just put the owl in the background and have that as the background image for us to be coding with. Now, here is where it does get very interesting for your students, because you could take the coding activity and turn it into a geography activity, or you could turn it into a history activity. And I noticed that there was one that was done by a school just last month, which I'll show you now as an example of that, because having just shown you how you can change the background to your coding that you're doing with the block coding. Let me go to the Twitter site, and I did a Twitter search for J2Code. And if you bear with me a second whilst we do this. Yes, so September the 29th, I have to zoom in a little bit here and see what the children have been doing. So this is just a tweet of children. Now, what they have been doing is they've taken pictures from the internet of the trenches in the Second World War. I think it was the Second World War. Let's be correct. No, that'll be trenches in the First World War. And yes, and what they've done is they've overlaid that as an image in the background. And what they've done is they've guided a soldier through the trenches, either to the front line or to the back of the trenches. But that in itself presents so many different options as to what you can do. This is a basic movement activity to learn to build algorithms using block coding with visual. But all they've done is they've just taken a picture of something and put it on the screen, and the instruction was down to the teacher's choice as to what the algorithm was going to do. In other words, pen down, draw your route using coding around the trenches to successfully get out of the trenches. Now, another option that I've seen working very neatly here with J2Code with visual is overlaying a map. Now, this could be a personal social health education, a PSHE type or citizenship type of activity, where instead of a picture of the trenches, you could overlay a simple map of Master Scala, for example. And in doing so, you could say, get your students to, once the map is there on the screen, you could say, now code the direction that you would go to get from the school to the local library, or the school to your supermarket, or from your home to the post office or the nearest post box, for example. You could set up a wide variety of challenges for your students to do with those sets of instructions. Now, one of the things that I think you will probably be all feeling in the background is, hang on a second, visual looks really complicated. How on earth am I supposed to use visual? Because there are so many different types of commands. Am I expected to know all of them? Well, the answer is yes and no. Would you be expected to know all of them? It would be helpful to have a quick look yourself as you're delving into J2Code to have a look and see for yourself the different options of motion, the ability to turn in different directions, the looks tool, the things that the sprites can do, the pen tool, the text tool, the event tool, the control tool, the sensing tool, various different operators and variables, and specific procedures. That, I think, would take maybe half an hour of deep dive playing with yourselves, but don't let it hold you up from actually taking this to your students with the lesson plans, because it takes every single student through a very quick course in using all of those different functionalities. One of the simple ones to get started with is in the year 3 and 4 lesson plans, and I'm going to just click on that one here. And let's have a look at the example. So the example here is a really simple process. Again, we've provided you with all of the backgrounds and the sprites to get going with this. Let's press play. What we see happening is the two Pac-Man moving together and saying hi, and then they move back. And whilst that's going on, just let's play that again. We can see that it's repeating that particular function 5 times. It's then switching the costume and then saying hi for a short period of time. And then they're moving back, which is exactly what we saw. Let's play that again. Repeating the motion, switching costumes to open-mouthed, saying hi, switching the costume back, and then moving backwards from each other. Nice and simple. Now, I did mention another word to you there, which was costume. So a costume is a way of animating. So the costume, which is the looks command, the looks command is there at the bottom. It's switch costumes. If I don't want to use it, if I just drag it onto the page like I've done there, because all I've done is gone look and drag the command onto the page. It's as simple as that. If I don't want it and I don't want to use it, I can just drag it to the bin and off it goes. The costumes are already provided. And if I click on the sprite, here are the two costumes, costume 1, costume 2, costume 1, costume 2. Pac-Man bytes. And it will switch between of those as it shows in the code. Let's press play again so that you can all see that happening. Repeating the motion, moving forwards, changing the costume to open-mouthed, and then switching the costume back, and then moving backwards. Really simple. Now, that is the process for the Pac-Man 1, which is that one, but there is also a command process, an algorithm for Pac-Man 2, which is exactly the same thing itself. So having seen the example, students can then go to the template and then they can build this instruction themselves. So for example, for Pac-Man 1, they might want to drag the motion of moving forwards by 100 and press play and see what happens. And they might be able to change the parameters by moving forwards. Let's just press stop and do it again. Didn't move me very far. So what I may want to do is repeat it. So for example, I'm going to the control functions here and repeat that process, and it snaps into place around the forward motion. Let's do that again. We might have gone too far. So we can then play with all of the parameters until we feel that we're getting it right. And it doesn't have to be exactly as it was in the example, but there you are. So that is how you can effectively run this as a lesson with all of the instructions pre-made, with the lesson plans available to you to learn how to do this activity. And there's a few more in there. You've got lesson 1, which is how to create a simple animation. Lesson 2 is then taking you a stage further and introducing you to new commands. And that command is called an if command. So if we look at that, and we have, I've opened the template. What I want to do is not Pac-Man. Let's leave that one there for a minute. Sorry, I've just opened a few many things. Let's leave that. Let's leave that one, and we'll go back in. Let's go back into lesson 2 here, and we'll have a look at the example. So here, an example is, and you can see on the screen, you've got the bat and a spider. So there's the bat, there's the spider, there's the bat, there's the spider, there's the cave in the background. But we'll look at the bat, and before we start playing with anything, we can see that the instructions are to repeat moving forward and switching costumes 25 times. With the spider, it's introduced a new command. So the repeat function is moving forward, and it's moving slower because it's a lower number that it's moving by, because the bat moves at 40, jumps at 40, and the spider jumps up to 15 per interval. The new command is if. And what's happening is if the spider is touching the bat, then this will happen. And it's showing that it is speaking for a short period of time, and then it's hiding. So in other words, what's happening here is the bat is chasing the spider and will eat the spider, at which point the spider goes, ah! Let's play and see what happens. There we go. Bat eats the spider and it disappears. Bat eats the spider and it disappears. And you see the toggles of all of these things moving in sequence. if I click on this if command, because this is one of the orange control commands, which is this one here, if I put the if control on the page, you'll also see that there is an additional functionality choice here when you click on the little star button. The star button allows you to add else if and also just else. But if we just leave it as if, we could, perhaps add if else, or change the control to if else. But if we want to, in this case, just leave it as if, we just leave it as if. And we just close the asterisk down. So we've got various different choices of how we can use the if command, because if the spider is touched by the bat at any point, then it will instruct the next activity to do whatever it is that I've commanded it to do. And then you move on to next lessons, which introduces vectors and to the grid. So maths activity here, as well as coding, where I'm introducing the concepts of grids and coordinates to understand how a grid will work. And if I just open up this one, for example, here you've got the planets. Oh, I've opened up the wrong one. Sorry. Let me just open up the example here, which you can have a quick look at. So here, very simple process. We have a number of different sprites. We've got the rocket itself, we've got the grey planet, the red planet, the sun, and the Earth. And this lesson actually teaches children about grid positions. So for example, if I pick up the rocket and move it anywhere, so if I move it to the middle of the page, you'll see that at the top of my screen here, let me just zoom in, it's showing X position and Y position and direction. It's all 0 because it's in the middle of the page. But as I move the rocket, you'll see that if I move it upwards, it goes up in the Y direction in positive numbers. But if I take it back to 0 and I move it in the opposite direction beneath the x-axis, it will move into the Y position negatively, showing that I'm at a negative position on the grid. So this lets children understand positioning on a graph, on a chart, and simply also x position in negative, x position in positive. So vectors and charting are very simply done there. And what it also introduces is new coding ideas of where things are positioned on the screen. So for example, if I drag the rocket to the sun, if I get anywhere near the sun, it will say it's very hot here. And also it'll show that the coordinates for the moon are -200, -100. And it'll show the coordinates for the Earth. And it'll put the Earth at the center. And it will also put the red planet at all of the points on the chart, on the chart, as you see there. So that introduces location and position, and how to do that with a number of different sprites, which the children can then see and play with for themselves. Now that also then takes us into the third area of J2Code, which is logo. And now this is absolutely beautiful. Just adore logo. As I've shown you just a minute ago, if we just click into logo, it's all leveled. And you've got, it always starts at level 1 and works its way through to level 3, where you see all of the extended commands there. Now with logo, this is actually really good fun. If we want to, we can choose a pen color and then we can start to draw shapes, and you can see that the algorithm is at the bottom of the page there, and you see the latest command that's been done, and you can carry on then changing the colors as you go. Not quite so obvious, that color, but let's build it in. So there we are, we're putting together the basic elements of our boxes. I might get confused in a minute. There we go. So I've put together green, yellow, and red set of boxes. When we move into level 2, what I'm seeing here is all of the commands that we've put in listed here, where we can alter any of the instructions and then press play again and continue where we left off. And you'll see that it again follows the entire process. So we're then building in this process of understanding how the algorithm then presents itself pictorially. Now, there are some lovely examples of logo being used, incorporating all of the commands here, which include the repeat function, because as anybody that will remember the spirograph thing that used to be able to put the pen in and be able to make it go around the series of cogs, it can produce some wonderful artistic results as well using the repeat function in logo. For example, things like this. Just as an example, you can see it building here on the screen, and it's using the repeat function and changing the process as we go to build parts of a flower. Now we can see this, we can speed it up, we can change the colors as we go if we want. There we go, we can see it building through. Now, one of the things, let me just fast forward this a little bit more. There we go. Fast forward the program and it's complete. It's cycled for the 6 steps that it was going to take. What you can do here is then utilize the code that you've made in a variety of different ways. Because what you can do is you can press Control and right click. So I've just pressed my Control and the right click button, and I can copy this image. Because what I might want to do is go back into J2E5 and paste my, oops. Oh, it never works in real life, does it? Where has it gone? Oops. Just when you want to do something and it works brilliantly in practice and it never works when you want to make it go live. Why is it not doing this? Copy that image. Go to J2E5. And it's not letting me.
Why don't you save it? You had save images as, and it's better practice. We don't advocate copy and paste. Because file size would get bigger. Save images and then you import it.
Oh, this worked beautifully earlier on, and it's a shame to have to do it this way. Now I'm on a Mac, so I can actually do, you know, I could save the image as and download that image and then go into J2E5 and let's just show that image when it's loaded up. So here I'm going to drag that image into J2E5 and there's my image. Thank you, Tanya. That's taught me a lesson that has never trust your own instincts, and if that wasn't a process that you would advocate, then always do it that way. But here, so we've got our image that we've made in code, and we could put it on our page. We could even have that in the background there on a document that I want to write, and we could have that as a background or an image that would be going in the background. Let's just move that one over there. So we could use that as maybe a border to go around some work that we're doing to writing up our experiences of coding. And you can do that with any of the tools that we've been talking about today to save a picture of that and then to be able to share it. Now, that's one of the fun things about doing it in J2E, is because when you're looking at the pupil files, or sorry, let me start again. When you're creating these pieces of code in J2Code as a student, one of the things that you may have noticed is that wherever you've gone and done something, you've still got the save and the publish button. So that will enable children to press publish, and that means that you as their educator and you as the class teacher have the moderate tool to choose your classes, go and have a look at your students in your class, and then to be able to review their work and then press publish on it so it appears on the class blog. And I haven't looked at it for a few days now, but if I have a look at the blogs that's happening from around the world at the moment, I wonder whether there's any happening at the moment in Malta. Yes, there are. Should we have a quick dive in, see what's been happening in Malta? Let's have a look. I haven't looked at this today, so I don't know what's there. 14th of October, there we go. So this is not coding, but this is students doing some English work here, and Tanaya has just written about alpacas. And there's some additional work here. But this, if it was coding, for example, this has been a piece of work created in J2E5, as I've just shown you. But if it was a piece of coding that the student had pressed publish on, what would show here is the actual code, and you would be able to press play and play that piece of code. So a great way for children to not only have a lesson with you using the simple lesson plans that will get them started, and I assure you it'll fire them off in all sorts of different directions, but it will also enable your students to play this and look at their classmates' work on this blog, play their classmates' pieces of code, and perhaps start to support each other in developing that, or giving them some other ideas as to how they could do it better, or how to support them in improving their own code themselves, or debugging their code, which is an important part of the learning process. But well done to Bakikara, and apologies about my pronunciation. So there you have the basics of J2Code. I've gone through JIT, I've gone through Visual, I've gone through Logo. Microbit is there too. We don't have lesson plans built in because they are all available from the BBC themselves. But the way that this works, it does give students an opportunity to get their hands on the actual practice of using the block coding that goes with Microbit, so that they can be that little bit further ahead when they get in the classroom, if they're lucky enough in the school to have microbits to hand that they can start to physically program with in the classroom. So that wraps me up for my quick seminar on using J2Code. And it's been a bit longer than normal because there's such a lot to it, and I do hope you get an opportunity to explore it. But what I would like to now do is check with you, Tanya, if you've got any questions, if anybody's got any questions here, or as they've been watching me go through the different coding tools, if they've got any thoughts or ideas or suggestions that they'd like to share. If you have any thoughts or questions, pop them in the chat.
Keith just asked, I would like to confirm, students have access to the lesson plans, don't they? I tried to log in with the dummy account. All students have access. Great, so they answered it. No questions yet.
Yes, your students, as well as you, the educators, all have access to the lesson plans, so they will be able to independently follow those lessons too. Fabulous. Has anybody thought of any other ideas once they've seen what I've been demonstrating here today as to how that they could tie that into particular aspects of the curriculum, perhaps that they would be normally teaching? For example, as I showed you on Twitter, the history lesson with the idea of getting your students to plot a course of your soldier crawling through the trenches.
Alistair, I'm going to ask you. Keith asks, is it possible for students to publish their work independently of their teacher?
Absolutely not. No, if a student wants to share their work, they can press the publish button, but nothing will happen until you, their class teacher, actually goes to the button called moderate. No work will ever be published visible to anyone else that a pupil. So if a pupil presses publish in any of the J2Code tools or any of the other areas of J2E like J2E5 or JET, a student can press publish to their heart's content once the publish button is there. But until you, the educator, go into the moderate button, which is just here, and then look at the posts in here and then approve them by looking at the post and then publishing it, nothing will go on a blog until you press publish. Okay, and the same goes for comments. Nothing that is written as a comment by any pupil or by anybody that's outside of your academic institution, nothing will get posted until you look at the comments and you see here the comments and you can approve them or bin them. Okay, so you're entirely safe. You'll never have accidental blog posts with perhaps inappropriate things, off-topic things being posted here. It's all down to whether you, when you viewed it, whether you approve it because it's on topic and it's appropriate or not. So nothing will get posted to the blog until you press the moderate button. Your work and your students' identities are safe. Okay. What I would really like you all to do is to take a look, and it shouldn't take long, if you spare maybe 10 minutes looking at one of the examples of the lesson plans in J2Code. And this week, during EU Code Week, think about how you would use your devices with the students to have a go at one of these activities. And not only to be able to complete one of those basic activities, but because your students are so fortunate to have the devices available to them, to be able to then share what they've been doing by pressing the publish button shouldn't take you very long at all. So I would encourage all of you to have a look at least once during EU Code Week. It's a European-wide, continent-wide initiative to get children into coding. It has research has proven that it increases computational thinking skills, and they are applicable skills that they will develop using things like J2Code in other subject areas and in all walks of life as well. The ability to break things down into different problems and to be able to solve those and move forward with their learning. If you would like any further support within J2Code, you've got a wide variety of other options to choose from. You could import anything that you've made in Scratch into here as well, so that you've got quick access to those resources that you've made in Scratch if you've been using Scratch already. There's a whole bunch of getting started videos and some additional resources such as excellent resources from Code Club, Barefoot Computing, Codeit and code.org as well. So I think that's enough from me. If you've got any questions, please do speak to Tanya. Don't be afraid to raise your voice. Tanya is just a text message away from me, and I'll be able to help and support directly too. And I really look forward to seeing what you've all been creating. Okay, so that wraps it up from me. Tanya, you could stop recording now. So this recording is going to be then available for everybody who may not have been able to get here. And I'd just like to say thank you very much for everybody for attending.